Hello, welcome back to this channel, and today we're talking about Cabin Fever 2002 and 2016, the original and the remake. Eli Roth versus Eli Roth, except he only produced the second one, he didn't direct it. It was directed by a man named Travis Zed, whose work I will not be investigating further because TLDR, Travis Zed's Cabin Fever is a pile of garbage. Now you can stop watching. But if you want to find out the reasons why I thought that movie was a pile of garbage, well, let's continue with the video. So, what's Cabin Fever? Both Cabin Fever's movies are the same. They're both about a group of five college students who rent a cabin in the woods, and they go, and then they are planning on having sex and drinking alcohol and doing shenanigans. Alright, regular setup. We've seen this a million times. We've all seen the Evil Dead movies. We're all familiar with the cabin in the woods scenario. Now, the original Cabin Fever is perfectly fine. It's kind of a comedy. It's kind of satirizing itself, which it's fine, and the characters are all reasonably compelling, and the acting is reasonably good, and the effects are really cool, and it's a fine movie. It's fine. It's good. It's a good movie. It's a fun movie. I had a good time watching it. I laughed. I enjoyed it. I had a good time. Now, the remake is a shot-for-shot, following the script remake of the first one. So, they got the script, they watched the movie, and they were like, we're making that, but with shittier actors, and we're gonna tilt the frame so that things that were on the right before are now on the left. Ta-da! Here's my movie. Enjoy! Now I have a list of problems that we need to address. I have a list that I made, and I'm very angry that I spent an hour and 45 minutes watching the movie, and I'm even angrier that the remake is 15 minutes longer than the original. That's the most frustrating part, because you're like stuck in there for longer, and you're like, fuck you movie, you piece of shit, you're wasting my time. So I'm gonna go through the list, and I think that's gonna be a more interesting way of discussing the films by comparing them instead of just talking about Cabin Fever and then talking about Cabin Fever. That way I can talk about the both Cabin's Fever movies, and that way it can be more of a dynamic conversation between me and myself, aka you, the camera, aka you, the viewer. So I think the biggest issue for me in the remake is that, so the original doesn't have a whole lot of action. It doesn't have a lot of, aggression in it. It's not, the violence is not it's not over the top. It's very gory, it's very horrific, but it's not violent. There's moments of violence because, they think they're being attacked and everyone's really tense because it's a tense situation, but they're not actively violent when they don't have to be. I think the remake is overtly violent, and I think it's to its detriment because there's no point to it. There's no point to the violence. It's just like shock value, And I was sitting there being like, okay, why are these kids so violent? Like, these are college kids. They wouldn't be this aggressive, They didn't seem to be this aggressive when we first met them. So now they're just out here just being aggressive, and we don't spend any time getting to know these characters. We don't spend any time kind of understanding their dynamic, which I think kind of is also to its detriment. Like, it's very much like scene without, like, there's character scenes, but they're not servicing the characters we're seeing. They just exist to be a remake of the original, so they don't work because the characters are played by different actors, so they have different dynamics because different actors are different people from the original. So they're different, they're just different, it's not the same. That's literally what different means, not the same. So I think the action scene, I think, also translates into things like the dogs. Like, the dogs in the movies are different, so there's themes of dogs being present in the woods, the guy that, you know, has the illness in the beginning of the movie, he has a dog and the dog dies, and he has, you know, and then there's another dog, and the dogs in the original, they're aggressive, but more in that they're kind of rabid, but they just seem angry and anxious. They don't seem actively to be like jumping at people and like, you know, they seem to be more into like looking for the chance to like, oh, I'm gonna get in on that, I'm gonna eat some foot or whatever. You know, they don't seem to be like intelligent beings who are looking to eat on a person. But in the remake, it's like these dogs are so aggressive, and they're like banging on doors and opening doors and like actively mauling humans, and it just feels like, you know, the dogs are just another enemy instead of just being like a byproduct of the stress that's happening in the woods. The dogs are just like another thing they have to be afraid of, that's like literally actively pursuing them, rather than just, oh, it's a byproduct of the thing that we're afraid of, you know, aka the illness, the bacteria in the blood. And I think that kind of lessens the tension, because in the original you're kind of always thinking about the bacteria and the disease, but then you've got all these like little fears of like, oh, we got the dogs now to be worried about, we got this thing, and it's like all the little tensions don't build up to be part of the overarching like fear of being ill, fear of catching it. They're just like disjointed, so it doesn't all fit together in the narrative, in the remake. Instead it all feels very, ironically, feels very dismembered. And it also has to do with like the type of violence that's shown. Like, it's, as I said, because the remake is so violent, it's like the aggression just doesn't fit. It's like the characters choose to be violent. It doesn't seem like that, like that's a last resort, that they're just having to take extreme actions. They're like, oh, I'm gonna choose to do this in the most violent way possible, instead of, oh, this is my last resort, I don't have a choice, this is it, I can't be anything else, this is it for me. So that's like, you're just like, what's happening, why are you being like this, you know? Which I think brings us to the characters. These characters are shit. In the original film, they're okay, they're nice characters, they're fun, they're, you know, they've got their own little dynamics. Bert is kind of an asshole in both films, but I think in the original he's kind of more like the goofy asshole who's part of your friend group, because he kind of looks a bit goofy. In the remake, he's kind of a, like, just like another hot guy who's like, I mean, he's not hot, I don't think any of them are attractive, but like, he's just like another, they all look the same, so it doesn't seem like the dynamic of the group stands up to what it's meant to be. But they're just terrible. Like, you've got the main guy, Jeff, who is meant to be like this really prissy, kind of like high-strung, you know, guy. But he doesn't seem to be like that, you know? Like, he doesn't seem to be overly concerned with his car. He doesn't seem to be super like private or like high-strung in the remake. Whereas in the original, he's got that kind of thing, you know, going on for him, where you understand why he would do the thing. Like, he's selfish, he is self-motivated, he is kind of, you know, slimy. He kind of doesn't look at me like, oh, I don't know if I trust you. And you've got that moment of him like threatening to like sue the redneck, and you're like, oh yeah, so he's like, he's a dick, you know. And the remake guy, he just seems like just your average asshole guy, but he doesn't seem to have all those characteristics that you would necessarily believe that he would like just up and leave because he's so selfish, you know? And even like the sex scene with him and his girlfriend in the original, he's like, it's way like, you know, there's something like they seem to be more intimate, you know, instead of just like hot guy, hot girl, have sex, the end. It's more like they have little things between them that shows them be in a relationship. And in the remake, they just seem to not like each other. So why are you together if you don't like each other, you know? So that's kind of annoying. And I think the Marcy nudity is a big issue for me. Of course, I think the original, the issues with the stuff with nudity was because the actress wasn't fully comfortable with some amounts of nudity. But it seems like they're just like getting back at her in the remake because of that. They're like, well, your character's gonna be nude all the fucking time. Screw you. Like, she even gets killed naked, you know? And I don't know, I'm not sure how comfortable I feel with that. And like, I don't know. It's not even tasteful nudity. It's just like, nah, here's my tits. I'm like, oh, I don't know. It's not great. And I mean, not to mention they're all terrible actors. All of them. In like the remake is ridiculous how bad they are. Like, why even cast good actors? You clearly have more of a budget. Is this like such a shit movie that you couldn't even get decent actors to be in it? I wonder why. And the Paul guy sucks. Like in the 2002 version, he's kind of like your best friend, like the guy next door who, you know, is kind of pining for his best friend since 7th grade, and they have that little dynamic between them, you know. Instead, in this, he's just like a weirdo guy who's just like kind of, I don't know how to describe it. He looks kind of slimy. I don't know, I don't trust him. And you're meant to trust, you know, the best friend guy, because he's just like, aw, you're your best friend, you know. He's like, I guess in terms of like Cabin in the Woods, which was like a satirized version of the original of these. You've got like the Jesse Williams character who's like the best friend, who's really sweet and who's really nice, and you know. And this is just like, all the three guys are the same, so there's no variance in how they react to things, there's no variance in how they respond to situations, they all do the same thing. So when their paths diverge, as they do in the original film, you don't get the point, you don't understand how they could diverge when they've all been behaving the same way throughout. Especially Bert, who is kind of an ass in the original, but then he becomes self-sacrificing. He's just an ass the whole time. He's kind of like, oh, trying to cover up this mystery, and then he's like, and then he leaves, and then he comes back and hides, and he doesn't, like, he never seems to, like, be like, okay, I have this, I'm gonna die anyway, I'm gonna sacrifice myself and kill these rednecks, you know? Which brings us to the Rednecks. Oh my god, the Rednecks. Like, could this movie hate them more? Like in the first one, it does feel like a parody of those types of movies. Look at these uneducated redneck types, you know, who have these little shops in the middle of nowhere, and they chew on tobacco and they shoot at, you know, and they make a little gag of like this old dude, this old white guy is like, this gun's for the N-words, you know, and he's like, he like almost like, oh, is he racist? It's like an actively racist dude, and it turns out no, he's not, and they have like a whole bit, and it's funny, it's like charming, it's kind of like, oh, it's, you know, it's an awe moment, you know, and they have like a character moment. They're not like you don't know what they're thinking, you just like see them happening and you see them reacting, and they go after, and they're more menacing that way. In the remake, there's like a whole moment of when they find out that Bert is sick, and they have a whole conversation where they're like, oh, we have to go to him, we have to kill the disease and stuff, and it's like, we don't need that, don't tell us, we know, we can just show him going after him, and it's more effective. You don't need to be like planning what you're gonna do, how you're gonna kill him. And in the 2001 version, there's that whole moment of Bert leaves the cabin, goes to the rest stop, and then the little kid from the beginning bites him again, and he potentially catches the disease, and his dad, who's like the redneck guy, is really angry, and he's like, well, if you're sick, that's your problem. If my kid's sick, that's my problem. If it's my problem, it's my wife's problem, and I don't want my wife to have a problem. And it's like a whole funny, like, it's like a language moment that's really funny. It also shows you a lot about the character without him having to tell you like, I am an evil guy, did you know that? I'm going to go after him and kill him with my shotgun. So it's like motivated by things that aren't like whatever, you know. It makes sense why he's doing what he's doing, why he's got this like band of ragtag rednecks to go after this one sick guy, because he's a vengeful motherfucker, and that's it, you know. And that makes sense, and you're cool with that, you go with it, because the movie has led you to that conclusion without having to expressly tell you that that's what's happening, because they haven't been able to show it to you. So I'm gonna move on to the deputy character, because that is an issue. So they do a few gender swaps in this. Like the guys, the couple that lives in the other cabin that they visit when they're looking for help, they gender swap that, so that Paul isn't looking at a naked lady, he's looking at a naked dude. But the main one was the police officer, who is played by a woman now. It's a female character instead of a male character. The name's still the same, and it's like in the original he was like this goofy dude who's like, yeah, I'm gonna party with you, my man. And when he inevitably turns on Paul and basically kills him for being sick and kind of being wanted by the police, you're like, oh man, that really happened. In this, you're just like all menacing and stuff, and when she's talking about partying and when she's at the party, you're like, you don't seem like a party dude. Like, you don't seem like a party character, like a character that would actively look for a party with a bunch of underage people. And it's the same parties, like people playing the guitar and teenage girls, and it's like, that doesn't fit with what the character is. So again, they kept it all the same, but then they changed like one thing and they didn't change anything around it. So it's like the film feels really disjointed because nothing makes sense together. You know, you might as well not have changed it, because if you're not gonna change anything around it, why would you change it? You know? But instead, now you have this police officer who's like actively suspicious. She's not just like a chill dude who's chill. She's like actively suspicious of them, and so she's like hunting them down. So she's another villain, you know, like the dogs that they changed for no reason. She's another villain for us anyway, because you're suspicious of her. Before, I wasn't suspicious of Winston. I just thought that's like a weird guy, you know? And it's the same with Grimm, who is the character that's played by Eli Roth in the first one, and he's just some guy in the remake. Grimm was like a cool guy who just like, hey, you know, charming and kind of a stoner, and it seemed like all the characters wanted to hang out with him and kind of chat with him. And you're like, okay, I believe that if this guy approaches, everyone's gonna want to hang out with him because he's got weed and he's kind of funny. But in the remake, he's just this creepy guy who kind of like approaches really eerily and like, yes, and he has like this comically large bag of weed. It was like, it's like the size of his face, and he's like, well, I'm gonna, you know, tempt you with my weed. And all the girls look so uncomfortable with him. All the guys look suspicious of him. But they say the same dialogue. So you're like, did they like him? Did they not like him? What's happening? What's going on? Who are these people? What are they doing? I don't understand. All these characters, none of them make sense because all the characters are terrible, but the actors are really bad. So it's like it's like they don't understand the motivation. They don't understand what they're meant to be doing, you know? And I think the biggest example of that is probably Karen, who's the other girl who gets sick first. The actress is terrible. She's like dead in the eyes, but they changed some of her character where she gets sick and she starts yelling a lot, you know? When in the 2002 version, she was like flirty and cute, and she was really good. I think she was really compelling. You felt really sad for her, and you feel when she dies. And in this, she's like flirting so much, but then she's like, she doesn't seem like she likes Paul. and then she gets sick and she starts yelling, and they're all yelling, and you're like, and you wouldn't do that. Like, that's not something that someone would do. She's sick, she's dying, she wouldn't be screaming, you know? And not only is she doing that, but then she's like begging for death, and then Paul just like shoves a shovel in her head, and then she's like, and then he sets her on fire. It's like, what's happening? Who are these people? Are they even friends? Like, surely you would want to, if someone was begging you for death, you would be more effective than just literally shoving a shovel in her mouth and not, making sure that that's actually killing her. So it's like, because the characters don't have any chemistry, the actors don't have any chemistry, the characters just don't make sense, and then the slight changes that they make even less sense, because they're at the service of nothing. They're at the service of pointlessly nothing. Because why would you remake it if you're just gonna make it the same but slightly worse, and why would you keep the same script and then change only a few of the things? Like, okay, they don't use the word gay anymore pejoratively, but those are like character moments, and they're also like a time capsule for like, this was made in 2002, and in 2002 idiot people would be like, yeah, this is gay, man. Okay, there's like versions of that you can do now. Instead, they just took everything out that would show a personality or like a character living in the world. Instead, they just have nothing. And actually, the biggest change that they made, I think, which was so shit, was the ending. Because you see throughout the ending, Karen has a phone. And I was like, oh, why does she have a phone? It turns out that she has a phone because she's posting on Facebook. So at the end, you see some random girl, you don't know who she is, you don't know where she's coming from, and she's on her phone looking at pictures of the trip that Karen's been posting on Facebook, and it's like, picture of the beach, picture of the lake, and then it's like her mauled face and Paul shoving with the shovel like this, about to, hit her in the face, and it's like, and then it just ends. You're like, what? What's going on? Like, they also changed it that Jeff, who previously hadn't got the illness because he never drank the water, he drank the water a little bit, so he got the illness, which means that when he's killed at the end, you don't feel anything, because you're like, oh well, he was gonna die anyway because he got sick, so who cares? In the original, he's like, oh, I'm free, I made it, and then he gets shot by all the police officers, and it's like, oh shit, And then in the end, in the original, you get this whole montage of the blood of Paul into the water, and then you get a big truck with the spring water that they're going to bottle to sell, because it's like a spring water town. So you get, the bacteria is gonna travel and everyone's gonna get sick, and you get all of that, and it's like, oh, that makes sense. You never get that in the remake, so there's no sense of dread for the future. You're just like, okay, the story ended. You kind of see Jeff in the water, kind of, but he's not really in the water, so you're like, is his blood in the water? Is this happening? And then it cuts from Jeff to the girl on social media. She does have a bottle of water on the back, but you're like, is that something? Is that meant to mean what the other film meant? What? So yeah, overall I think Cabin Fever, the original, is pretty fun. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really cool movie. I think it's kind of satirical and kind of an interesting way, but it's also, it kind of takes itself seriously. The dread is serious. The dread of the bacteria is serious, and the film understands that, and the characters are compelling, and you're with them, and you feel bad for them, and you feel upset when they're dying. Especially the girls are suffering so much, and you're with them for enough time that you care about their well-being, and the boys are not heroes. They're just like trudging along and trying to do their best. And in the remake, all the characters are just terrible, and the actors are doing terribly, and all the changes are completely useless, and they work to the detriment of the story. So it doesn't work as a remake because it doesn't improve upon the original. It doesn't work as a remake because it doesn't add anything to the story. And it doesn't work as a remake because why would you remake something that's already fine? Obviously people do that, but like, especially like, what, 4 years after Cabin in the Woods? Like, why would you remake Cabin Fever after Cabin in the Woods has been made, when that's pretty much like a satirical remake? You know, like, why would you make something that was a little bit funny and a little bit satirical more serious when there's no audience for it, no one wanted it? Why would you do that, you know? So that was kind of shit. I know that there's other sequels to it, but I think the 2016 Cabin Fever is just absolute garbage, and it's such a waste of time, and it's such a pointless endeavor, and it's so poorly made by everyone involved. And I'm very sorry. I'm sure that, you know, they did their best, but it's truly just, it feels like a pointless waste of time. I hated it. And I really liked the original, which makes me sad, because I'm like, oh, it's like it almost taints the memory of the original, because you're just thinking about how shitty the remake was, you know? So that was very good. Anyway. Don't watch Cabin Fever 2016, but do watch Cabin Fever 2002, because it's really good. I rented it on Amazon. I was glad I did, because it was money well spent. I bought the DVD for Cabin Fever 2016, and now I just have it. So, great. Fantastic. Yeah, so I think that's all I had to say about... Yeah, that's all I had to say about Cabin Fever. I think, you know, I think it's cool to compare remakes and originals, because there's a reason why people remake things, you know, either nostalgia or wanting to improve upon something, or, you know, cash grabbing, and I don't know what could be the reason to remake this, because I don't think any of those things apply. I don't think it was improved, I don't think there was nostalgia, and they definitely didn't make any money. So it's like, you know, your guess as good as mine. So that would have been a terrible night. It's a miserable night, but then I watched Dead Snow, and that was fantastic. Very funny. I laughed a lot. The zombie Nazis are hysterical. So if you're looking for a good movie, don't watch Cabin Fever 2016. Watch Dead Snow instead. So that's it for me tonight. I hope you enjoy this. Please let me know what you think of Cabin Fever down there. If you like the remake, if you're crazy. I mean, if you like it, that's fine. I'm not gonna judge you for liking a movie. I think there's, you know, the only thing a movie can be that makes it really bad is boring, and unfortunately the remake was kind of boring, as well as being, you know, bad. So if it was at least entertaining, I could have forgiven a lot, but it was really boring, so it wasn't. So please let me know what you think of that. As I said before, the links are just down there, so follow me on Letterboxd, on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, and I'll see you next time.